Good afternoon. Today we are announcing federal charges against two men for large-scale SNAP benefit trafficking, a scheme that turned a program designed to feed families into a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise.
Authorities say more than $4 billion vanished through fake daycares.
Federal agents have just raided 87 daycare centers across Minnesota.
At 4:12 a.m., the east side of Minneapolis was frozen silent. Snow clung to the corners of shuttered storefronts. Street lamps cast yellow halos through the fog. To the families living in the modest apartment complexes along Cedar Avenue, it was just another January morning. Cold, quiet, unremarkable. But 3 blocks away, a shadow army was assembling. More than 300 federal agents from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Unit, and the IRS Criminal Investigation Team moved with synchronized precision. Armored black SUVs idled in tight formation. Ballistic shields gleamed under tactical lights. Agents wore heavy vests stamped with bold yellow letters: FBI, ICE, Police. Their target wasn't a cartel safehouse. It wasn't a drug warehouse or a smuggling tunnel. It was a daycare center. Little Stars Learning Academy. A cheerful 2-story building with hand-painted murals of elephants and rainbows across the front windows. A place where parents dropped off their children every morning. Where toddlers played with blocks and sang songs. Where the director, a beloved member of the Somali community named Amina Hassan, greeted families with warm smiles and reassurances. But what federal investigators were about to uncover inside the building would expose something far darker than anyone in Minneapolis could have imagined. Because Little Stars Learning Academy wasn't educating children. It was laundering billions. This story begins exactly 47 hours earlier. In a secure operations room inside the FBI's Minneapolis field office, Senior Special Agent Darnell Cortez stared at a screen filled with financial data that didn't make sense. The numbers were staggering. Impossible, even. Over the past 6 years, a network of daycare centers across Minnesota had submitted reimbursement claims to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Child and Adult Care Food Program. The program was designed to provide meals to low-income children. A simple system. A generous safety net. But the numbers Agent Cortez was looking at weren't simple. $4.3 billion. That's how much money had flowed through a web of 87 daycare facilities, all clustered in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding suburbs. All registered under similar business structures. All operated by members of the same tightly knit community. All submitting meal reimbursement claims for children who, according to federal auditors, didn't exist. Think about that number for a moment. $4.3 billion. Enough to fund a small nation's education system. Enough to build 40 hospitals. Enough to change the trajectory of an entire generation. But instead, it vanished into a network of shell companies, luxury real estate purchases, and encrypted offshore accounts. And at the center of it all was Amina Hassan, a 46-year-old mother of 4. A woman who had fled civil war in Somalia as a teenager and rebuilt her life in America. A woman who spoke at community events about resilience and opportunity. A woman who federal agents now allege orchestrated the largest COVID relief fraud scheme in U.S. history. But here's where it gets worse. She didn't do it alone. As FBI analysts combed through 6 years of financial records, they discovered a pattern. The daycare centers weren't isolated operations. They were nodes in a coordinated network. The same vendors. The same food distributors. The same accountants filing paperwork. The same banks processing wire transfers. And when investigators followed the money, they found something that made the entire room go silent. Shell companies registered in Dubai. Luxury homes purchased in cash across Minneapolis suburbs. A private jet leased under a holding company in the Cayman Islands. And wire transfers, hundreds of them, flowing to accounts in Turkey, Kenya, and Somalia. This wasn't fraud. This was infrastructure. This was a financial empire built on the backs of a federal program designed to feed hungry children. The operation was elegant in its simplicity. The daycare centers would claim to serve meals to thousands of children every day. Breakfast, lunch, snacks. The federal government reimbursed them based on attendance records and meal counts. The money flowed automatically. Millions of dollars every month. But the children? They were ghosts. Federal auditors conducting surprise inspections found daycare centers with no furniture. No toys. No staff. Just empty rooms with fake enrollment rosters listing names pulled from public records. In one case, a daycare claimed to serve meals to 342 children in a building with a maximum occupancy of 60. In another, surveillance footage showed the facility completely dark for weeks, while meal claims continued to pour in. The fraud accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic. When lockdowns forced legitimate daycares to close, federal regulators loosened oversight to ensure children still received food assistance. They waived in-person inspections. They allowed electronic documentation. They prioritized speed over verification. And the network saw an opening. Within 6 months, the number of claimed meals quadrupled. Daycare centers that had served 50 children suddenly reported feeding 400. Facilities that didn't exist 6 months prior were now submitting claims for tens of thousands of meals per week. The money flowed like a ruptured dam. And no one was watching. Ask yourself this: how does a fraud scheme operate for 6 years without detection? How do 87 fake facilities submit billions in claims without raising red flags? And who exactly allowed this system to collapse so completely? The answer is as disturbing as the crime itself. Because this wasn't just fraud. This was system failure. This was oversight that never happened. This was bureaucracy so bloated and so broken that it couldn't distinguish between feeding children and feeding criminals. And federal investigators now believe dozens of officials knew something was wrong, but did nothing. Back in the operations room, Agent Cortez assembled the case file. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing identical deposit patterns across multiple accounts. Invoices from food suppliers that didn't exist. Forged inspection documents. And a digital trail that led directly to Amina Hassan and her inner circle. There were 16 co-conspirators identified. Some ran individual daycare centers. Others managed the shell companies that funneled the money. A few handled logistics, forging documents, falsifying meal counts, coaching center operators on how to avoid audits. But Amina was the architect. The one who recruited participants. The one who structured the network. The one who, according to seized financial records, personally received more than $47 million in fraudulent proceeds. She used that money to purchase a $2.3 million estate in a gated Minneapolis suburb. A luxury condominium in Dubai.
A Mercedes S-Class. A Range Rover.
And private school tuition for her children, while claiming to feed children who didn't exist. The irony was suffocating. On the morning of January 28, 2026, the federal hammer dropped. At exactly 4:12 a.m., 300 agents launched coordinated raids across the Twin Cities metro area. Team Alpha hit Little Stars Learning Academy. Team Bravo stormed Amina Hassan's estate. Team Charlie swept through 4 other daycare centers simultaneously. Team Delta secured the offices of the nonprofit that served as the fiscal sponsor for the entire network. At Little Stars, agents breached the front door with a tactical ram.
The building was dark, silent, no children, no staff.
Just rows of empty tables and a back office filled with filing cabinets. But when agents opened those cabinets, they found the evidence they needed. Fake enrollment rosters listing thousands of children.
Forged signatures.
Meal logs claiming to feed 400 kids per day in a facility with a kitchen the size of a closet. And spreadsheets, detailed, meticulous spreadsheets, tracking the flow of federal money through a labyrinth of shell accounts. At the estate, Amina Hassan was taken into custody without incident. She stood in her marble foyer in a silk robe, surrounded by agents in tactical gear, and said nothing.
Her home told the story for her.
Luxury furnishings. Designer clothing still tagged. A wine cellar stocked with bottles worth thousands. In the garage, 3 vehicles. Combined value, $410,000. In the safe, $1.7 million in cash, vacuum-sealed in plastic bundles. Across the metro area, the raids unfolded with military precision. Agents seized computers, servers, financial records, and encrypted phones. They arrested 14 of the 16 identified co-conspirators. And they froze accounts containing more than $380 million in fraudulent proceeds. But 2 members of the network vanished. Federal investigators believe they were tipped off. Bank records show large cash withdrawals in the days before the raids. Airport security footage captured one suspect boarding a flight to Istanbul 48 hours before the arrests. The other's car was found abandoned near the Canadian border, engine still warm. U.S. Marshals have issued warrants. Interpol has been notified. But as of now, they remain at large. And investigators know, people who build empires like this don't run without contingency plans. They have second identities, safe houses,
Hidden accounts. The hunt is far from over.
As federal prosecutors began building their case, the scale of the fraud became even more staggering. The investigation revealed that the network had filed more than 48,000 fraudulent meal claims. They had created fake identities for over 12,000 children who never attended a single daycare session. They had submitted invoices from food suppliers who didn't exist, claiming to deliver millions of meals that were never prepared.
And the federal money? It didn't stay in Minnesota.
Forensic accountants traced wire transfers to 18 countries. Real estate purchases in Dubai, Nairobi, and Istanbul. Luxury vehicles shipped to East Africa. And tens of millions funneled into accounts controlled by individuals with no connection to childcare, but clear connections to organized financial crime. Federal agents now allege that the daycare fraud was just the visible layer. Beneath it was a sophisticated money laundering network that moved illicit funds across borders, cleaned them through real estate and business investments, and reintegrated them into the legitimate economy. This wasn't just stealing from a government program. This was building a transnational financial pipeline using American taxpayer dollars as the fuel. Amina Hassan now faces 73 federal counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and theft of government funds. If convicted on all counts, she faces more than 200 years in federal prison. Her co-conspirators face similar charges. The seized assets, homes, vehicles, bank accounts, are being liquidated to recover taxpayer money. But here's what keeps investigators awake at night. As forensic teams worked through the encrypted servers seized during the raids, they found something chilling. Communication logs. Encrypted messages to individuals in other states. Officials who are still processing government benefits. Still signing off on program applications.
Still approving claims.
The Little Stars network was dismantled. But federal analysts now believe it was just one node in a fraud ecosystem that spans multiple states, multiple programs, and multiple communities. An ecosystem that exploits the gap between federal funding and federal oversight. An ecosystem that turns safety net programs into profit engines. And the architects of that system? The ones who taught Amina Hassan how to structure shell companies, how to falsify documents, how to move money without detection. They're still out there. Still recruiting.
Still teaching.
Because fraud at this scale doesn't happen in isolation. It requires knowledge.
Infrastructure.
A network of people who understand the system well enough to dismantle it from the inside. It requires corruption that hasn't been exposed yet. If you believe every federal program should face independent audits with real consequences for fraud, comment audit below. This isn't just a Minnesota problem.
This is a system problem.
And it's happening in your state too. The daycare fraud case reveals an undeniable truth. The most dangerous theft doesn't always come from criminals breaking in. Sometimes it comes from people you trust, using systems designed to help, exploited for profit while everyone looks the other way. $4.3 billion. That money was supposed to feed children. Instead, it built mansions. It funded luxury lifestyles. It disappeared into a financial labyrinth that stretches across continents. And here's the part that should terrify you. This scheme operated for 6 years. 6 years of fake claims. 6 years of ghost children. 6 years of federal money flowing to people who never fed a single meal. And it only stopped because one auditor finally looked closely enough to see what everyone else ignored. How many other networks are operating right now? How many other programs are hemorrhaging billions while bureaucrats check boxes and assume the system works?
Stay here.
Because this investigation isn't finished. The 2 suspects who fled are still at large. The international accounts are still being traced. And federal prosecutors believe there are more arrests coming. Hit subscribe so you're here when the next raid happens. This is the fraud case that proves the safety net has holes big enough to drive luxury vehicles through. And someone needs to be watching.
Stay vigilant.
Because the next community leader promising to help your children might already be stealing their future.